My name is Scott Durow, commonly pronounced as Durow. So actually, the pronunciation of names would be very good for that. So I've been a business applications MVP since 2013. I've had the pleasure of kind of growing up with a platform from all the various different pieces coming together to make the awesome platform that we know today. There's my various different social media profiles that you can go and reach me on. But you might have seen me as the Lemmings guy. I write games in Power Apps quite a lot, just to kind of just prove that they can do certain things. But before that, I was the kind of Ribbon Workbench guy, and this was a tool that allows you to customize Power Apps, model-driven apps. And before that, it was Dynamics 365, and before that, it was Dynamics CRM. But today, I'm going to be the creatorkit guy. So what is the creatorkit? So the creatorkit is a solution that's been developed by the PowerCat team, and I actually had the pleasure of working with the PowerCat team on it. And it's a group of components that you can install into your environment and then use in both in your Canvas apps and also your custom pages inside model-driven apps. And it basically creates this Fluent UI style set of controls that you can create user interfaces that look very similar to the Office, the SharePoint, the model-driven app style of user interface. And, you know, sometimes it can be quite hard to create user interfaces that look consistent with other parts of the Power Platform. So it just bridges this gap until perhaps the first party, there will be out of the box controls to do this. And it's open source. You can get the source code. And so I'm going to give you some links at the end, and here they are actually, if you want for reference on how to do all of the installation, etc. But what I'm going to show you specifically in this presentation is how to show data in tabular format. Because one of the things, if you're using SharePoint, tabular data is very common, right? You know, we all create a list and you can add columns and you can move them around. If you've used model-driven apps, again, you know, it's a very common thing. You have your list, you can sort and you can add different columns and select different rows. It's kind of basic kind of stuff. But if you are using Canvas apps without the Creator Kit, we've all been there. We've tried to create grids using galleries. I've done it so many times, and it feels a little bit like Jenga because you know, you get it looking really great, and then you try and adjust something, and then it all sort of comes tumbling down. Well, I mean, at least that's my experience. And so what the Creator Kit has got is it's got something called the DetailsList. And if we come down to the reference app that you get when you install the Creator Kit, and I'm not going to go through on how to install it because there's a whole ton of really great documentation. If you go to the Learn page, which I'll give you a link to, there is fantastic set of documentation on how to install it, what you need to do, the prerequisites, and also documentation on all the different components. But one of the parts of that installation is you get a sample reference app, and part of that reference app is a section on the details list. So you can see here that we've got, you know, like it demonstrates all of its different capabilities, and you know, it does basic grids, but you can also have things like icons, and you can have tags, and you can have expanding and collapsing elements. You can have inline content as well, sort of content that perhaps in a responsive environment you might want to wrap it over into multiple lines to keep the data density high. And so what I'm going to show you is how to do that, right? Because, you know, it's a demo. So I've got just a Canvas app here, and I'm going to go and create a new screen, and I'm going to use this responsive layout here, which is using containers. And so we've got the root and then 3 different containers in there. Now the middle container is this container here, which is a stack set of containers. So this makes it very easy to put our components in there so they just automatically stack up, and I can adjust the relative heights, make them stretch to the full width. So if you've not used responsive containers yet, I really recommend going and checking them out because it makes making apps work on multiple different device formats really, really easy. Um, and grids are all about data density. I mean, this is the thing, because galleries are fantastic, right? You know, I can go and add in a gallery, and I can bind that to some data, and I can, you know, add an image, and I can add sort of like a headline piece of data, and then sort of a subheading, and then maybe a secondary bit of data, and then a chevron to go and expand to show more data. But then if you want to actually cram lots of data into there, then that's where grids really come into their own, because it allows you to sort of have these columns that you can then resize and, like I said, wrap on multiple lines if you need to. So by default, you don't have a Fluent style grid. We've got this data table preview, which has got some basic data grid formatting. It's quite limited in what it can do, but you know, sometimes it might be useful. But in order to get the details list from the creator kit, you have to go down to this rather sort of hidden little thing down at the bottom here. Well, that's a bit too large. Let's just zoom out a bit. Oh my goodness, that's there. There we go. How big can we get this? I've got a new mouse, and it's somewhat a little bit trigger happy. But anyway, down the bottom we've got this get more components. So I'm going to go and add in a details list from the PowerCat. So if I search here, you can see here it's got details list from the PowerCat publisher. And once I do that, it will then be added into, there we go, I'll import that. It'll be added into my set of controls that I can insert into my Canvas app or my custom page. It doesn't come under the layout, it comes under this code components area. And you know, it's a slightly different. If you've used Canvas components, it's going to be slightly different. So you have to go to this code components area. And so when I add in this component, it just sort of pops it in as a square block. Not really very interesting. But if I select this middle responsive container there, I can start to set the properties to say, okay, I'm going to stretch it out to fill the whole width there, and I'm also going to make it I'm going to make it a flexible height, so it'll fill the whole height. And in order to get this started to show data, I obviously need to go and add some data to my app. So I'm going to add in accounts. And if we've got time, hopefully we'll also show wiring it up to some contacts as well. So I'm going to add contacts in as well, like that. So if this was a gallery, right, I would go over to the items property that I'm going to bind this to, and I put in the values that I want to, the record set that I want to bind it to. So in this case, I'm going to say filter on accounts and show only where there is an industry set, because I'm going to show that as a column. So as soon as I do that, it loads the data. So if I highlight this, you can see I've got some data in here, which is great, but it's not showing it because it's still giving me this message to say there are no columns defined. So there are two things I need to do. Firstly, I need to define which columns I'm going to show. So at the moment, by default, I've just got the standard view, so the account name, etc. So I'm going to add in an industry, and I'm also going to add in telephone as well, like that. Telephone. Oh, perhaps it's already in there. And let's see. Yep, there's main phone. It's already in there. Okay, good. So what we'll do now is you can see that it's still saying there are no columns defined, because there's that second step. And this is the really important step, is because if you've used SharePoint or model-driven apps, you'll know, obviously, you've got to define the view layout. If I come into this columns property, this is where I say, we've got the raw data, which is what we bound to, you know, that we've bound it to the accounts. But we've now got to say, well, which columns do you want to show and in which order? And so the way we do this is, or one of the ways we can do this is we just define a table, and we can define a row for each of the different columns. I'm just going to paste in some data into there, just so you don't have to watch me type that out, which would be particularly painful. So there we go. Now, what this is doing is each of these rows in this table here, so the first one has got a number of different properties, and in the docs there's a description of what these do. So, but basically, the simplest is you've got the name of the column that you're going to bind this particular column in the view to, and then the display name, and then the width. This is the sort of like the minimum information. Now you could obviously make this width responsive to based on the parent width and divide it by the number of columns, etc. But there's also these extra set of properties. So in this case, I'm going to say, right, well, this is the name column. So I'm going to say this is the header cell. So it's going to be slightly bigger. I'm going to make it bold. But I'm also going to say it's sortable and it's resizable. And equally for the telephone as well. So if I go now and run this, it's looking good. I've got my data here, and I can sort by this, and I can sort by telephone. And so it's immediately giving me that ability to show my tabular data. And the critical thing here is this is all happening, this sorting, for example, is all happening in a delegatable way. So if you've done any work on large data sets, you'll know that it's very important to make sure you've got delegatable filtering and sorting. And so this sorting will automatically be handled against the data source. So that's all great. And what I'm going to do is add in a little bit more information. So add in some more columns here. So there we go. There's our existing 2 columns, and I'm just going to pop in 3 more. So I've got industry code, primary contact, and description. So just a couple of things I want to point out here. On primary contact, okay, the standard stuff that we would expect, primary contact ID, which is the name of the column and the display column. But there is this slightly interesting separate sort by column, and this is very specific to Dataverse in the sense that we're displaying the name of the contact, but when we are if we are going to sort by that, then Dataverse would sort of doesn't really know if it needs to sort by the ID or if it's going to sort by the name of the contact. So you need to give it this slightly different format. But if I run this, you'll notice that it's not giving me this description column. And this is a very, very common pitfall because I can sort by primary contact. So if I show, there we go, there's all my contacts, but it's not showing the description. And the reason being is if I go into edit here, I haven't added this into my fields that I'm going to expose. And this is very important because what you're doing is you're telling Power Apps what data needs to be requested from that data source. So it doesn't just go and get all the data. And so now you can see as soon as I do that, you can see we're now getting the description added to each of the row. But also notice that it's added underneath that first row. And the reason being is if you look at the columns down here, we've got a special property here called show as subtext of. So we're saying show this particular piece of information as a child of the name. And you could make this dynamic. So, based on the format, the width of the app, you could fold in to show it as a child column, or if you've got space, show it as a separate column. So that's all great. And one thing to point out here is that this is all accessible. So I'm using the cursor keys here to move up and down, and I can tab around as well, and I can use return to actually do all of the sorting. And this is some of the things that are actually quite difficult to manage if you're using galleries to sort of, but we would just assume that they work for grids. It's just one of those kind of things. So what I do now is I'm going to show a additional row for the related columns. The related contacts. And the way that I'll do that is I'll go into the container here, and I'll add in another details list. So it's going to add it underneath. Now, apologies, I'm not, but just because I haven't got enough time, I am not naming all my containers and my controls using a correct naming convention, which you obviously should do. But there we go. I've now added in my a separate details list, and what I want to do is I want to say when I select a contact in the top here, it shows the related contacts below. So I'm just going to pop in some columns for this child set of contacts, but also going to bind it to the, like that. Okay, I'm going to bind it to some the contacts here. And what I'm doing here is I'm saying, only show me the contacts where the company name on the contact equals the selected account in the top grid, because there are lots of properties that these grids give you. So you can give them input properties, so the rows that you want to show, the view, but it's also got output properties. In this case, which row has been selected. It's also got other output properties like the number of records, the number of pages, all of those kind of things. There's also this interesting thing here, this as type. And what this is doing is because the parent company or the parent of a contact is actually a polymorphic lookup, so it can be related to a parent account, or actually it could also be related to a parent contact. So I'm sort of casting this, I'm forcing it to always use the account, and otherwise there would be a type mismatch here. And again, that's sort of like a Dataverse thing. So I'm going to pop in a column, go into the columns here, and I'm going to say tables, like that, a table, and put in a column. Oh, no, not that one. That's a little bit, let's just jump in the gun and for a little bit more. So there we go. And now we're showing, if I select that, it's now showing only the contacts for that selected record. But the last thing I wanted to show you is that when we are using these details lists, it's got the ability to show some slightly different formatting for these cells, because if you're using a gallery, obviously it's super flexible. Okay, you can show any data that you can use any formatting, any colors, fonts, type buttons, all those kind of things. With a details list, there is a trade-off, right? You do have to manage that trade-off. But if I go into my fields here and add in my credit hold there, like that, we now, if we wanted to show that as a sort of like a colored tag, like a SharePoint list style thing, what we can do is you can come into the format of my credit hold column, and I can define this as being a tag. So here we can see that we've now defined this as a tag column cell, and we're also saying we're now defining the color is going to be taken for this particular cell from this other column here, this credit tag color. And so at the moment it's just gray, right? Because we haven't defined that additional column. And so the way we do that is if we come into the records for this particular contact, and if I replace this, what I'm doing here is, let's just name this as grid contact, because that's the name we're going to give it. And I go into here. What we're looking at here is grid accounts. Then we're just adding in an additional column called credit tag color, because that's the name we specified in our view property when we're defining the columns. And we're just saying if its credit hold is true, then we're going to give it this color. If it's not, we'll have this color. And so if we run this, you can see, there we go. We've got it now highlighted in different colors. And there are sort of different other things you can do, put in SVGs and things like that. Now, I just want to highlight something lastly, and that is that as soon as you do this, you do lose some of the sorting aspects, because this is now using a local collection, because you used add columns. It's not binding directly to the Dataverse. So if you come over into the documentation and you look at the behavior section. There's a lot of information there on how to manage sorting when you're binding it to a collection rather than directly to a data source, as well as how to manage paging and all of those kind of things. So it's a fantastic set of documentation that backs that up. And there's even kind of code samples that you can copy and paste in there. But yeah, that's really what I wanted to show you, how you can very quickly get that kind of fully fledged data grid style functionality very, very quickly without having to go and use that Jenga style grid using galleries. So yeah, David, that's all from me.
Awesome, Scott. Well, I think now we can officially call you Awesome Demo Guy. I think everybody agrees with that. So you can add another one to the list. Very, very good.
Those links actually, we'll those are the links. So I guess you'll email those out to get more information.
Yeah. I put them in the chat earlier for you as well, so everybody can get that. So excellent. Thank you, Scott. Very, very cool.